Hello class, this video I'm going to kind of synthesize our 7 weeks, really focusing on the purpose of assessment and then the psychological report. I also am going to apologize for the lighting of this video. My office is just one long wall of windows, so I can tell that there is a reflection, so my apologies for that. Let me just be clear that assessment is not optional. You must assess, you must do a clinical interview. And so what does that look like? What does that mean in real life? So let me walk you through a first session with the client. So you're in practicum or internship and you're bringing back your first client, and you're going to go over paperwork. You're going to make sure they understand confidentiality and the limits of confidentiality. You want to address starting the session on time, ending on time, giving a 24-hour notice if they need to cancel, going over payment. And then I'm also going to go over my philosophy of counseling, my approach to counseling, my style of counseling. I'm giving them an opportunity to ask me questions about that, making sure they're on the same, that we're on the same page about counseling. And then I'll also let them know what the next 2 to 3 sessions will look like, and that it's really about me gathering information from them so I know how to better help them. When they have an understanding of that, then they tend to join. They tend to be engaged in the clinical interview, and they will be actively participating in answering your questions. When you don't explain that in the first session, then their idea of counseling is that you're going to give them steps 1, 2, and 3 and wave a magic wand and all the problems go away. Okay, that's not realistic. That's not how counseling works. So you have to explain the process. I also explain, especially if I have trauma clients, I spend time explaining emotions. I explain that there will be times when they walk away from counseling loving it, and there'll be times when they walk out and they're sad. And now they're wondering if they should come back because maybe I struck a nerve, or maybe we're talking about things that are uncomfortable. And so I tell them, that's normal. It's normal to kind of have a roller coaster of emotions. And when that happens, we can take time to dialogue about that. Share with me what you're going through, especially when you're kind of at a place of, ooh, this is uncomfortable. Then let's talk about it. You're in a safe place. So I really want to reassure them, especially in that first session, that they are in a safe place. That's really important. Again, especially if you're working with trauma clients, they need that reassurance that they are safe. Okay, then the next 2 to 3 sessions, I'm spending time with that clinical interview. At the same time, discussing the presenting problem, but then questions around that. So when was the first time you noticed that you had symptoms of depression? What age, or what was going on that those symptoms occurred? Now, is there a time when you didn't have those symptoms, when you didn't feel depressed, and what was happening then? And so being able to find out through them, what are ways that they have solved some of those issues that has worked for them, that are healthy, and then how can we implement that, and how can we keep them to continue implementing healthy coping skills as we're dealing with the problem. Then I'm also looking at family history. So I'm looking at family of origin. So if the client's coming in with depression and anxiety, I'm curious about family of origin. Is there anyone else in the family that has experienced or is experiencing depression or anxiety? And kind of talking about that family of origin. Also talking about family of origin to know more about them, as far as what does family mean to them? What do they learn from their family? What did they learn about religion? What did they learn about God? What did they learn about holidays, birthdays, relationships? Do they come from a family that's touchy-feely, or do they come from a family that was very distant, hands off? I want to know those details, because we bring what we learn from our family of origin into our present relationships. And some of that can be really good and healthy, and some of it could be detrimental and can be what's part of destroying current relationships. And so I want to know about family of origin, and then how does it relate to present day. You're asking questions about work. Do they feel fulfilled in their career? I want to know dating history. So there's lots of questions to ask. And some of those questions I will depend on the presenting problem and on the answers that they're giving me. So the book talked about the structured, semi-structured, and unstructured interview. You need to find what works best for you. I would say as beginning therapists, you need to stay with the structured to semi-structured. Do not do the unstructured, especially as a beginning therapist, because then you will have no control over the session. So really be more on the structure side, and then as you get into a routine, as you get into your comfort zone with it, then you can really move more into the semi-structured. Then choosing an instrument. So if you have a client who has never had a diagnosis, they're coming to you with depression, how can you give a diagnosis if you're not testing for that? So it's really important that you give something like the DAS, maybe start with the Hamilton. You can even do the Beck Depression Inventory. But if you do the Beck Depression Inventory, then you really need to follow up with the DAS. The Beck Depression Inventory really is more of just a screening. And so you always want to do at least 2 to make sure there's some consistency in answers. And I don't give a diagnosis right away either. I'm really trying to spend time gathering as much information as possible, especially if there's not been a diagnosis ever. And I don't just want to randomly give them one. I also want to spend time talking about the biological side. So when was the last time they had a physical? When was the last time they had blood work done? I'm looking at age. So when women are in their 40s and they've never been diagnosed with depression and they're feeling depression, well, I'm gonna ask questions about perimenopause. I'm gonna ask questions about hormones, because that can be typical of that age group. When hormones change, when your body's changing, there can be some symptoms of depression and anxiety. And sometimes that depression and anxiety is not what we would consider DSM-5 depression and anxiety. That depression and anxiety is a side effect of the hormones being so unbalanced. And so I want to make sure that they have gone through a physical, they've done blood work to check hormone levels, thyroid, those types of things, before I just automatically assume that this is all psychological. We want to rule out anything medical. And I explain that to my clients, and they really do appreciate that, because I will say most clients that I have are probably more holistic and are wanting to look at their lives from a holistic viewpoint rather than just send me to a psychiatrist and let me take medication. I think that was how it was when I first started counseling. But I would probably say in the last 5 years, I've had more clients interested in the holistic view of counseling, a view of life, and wanting to be able to rule out if there's anything else going on than just assuming that they need to be on Prozac or whatever antidepressant for the rest of their lives. So take time with the biological side. Again, we're not MDs, and I explain that to my clients that I'm not a medical professional, but it's important that they go to someone who can help rule out anything medical, and just making sure that everything is okay from that end. So clinical interview. So we're looking at the bio, psycho, social, spiritual. You're going to determine what kind of instrument to give at some point. Usually by the second or third session, you want to have, especially again, if we're talking about depression and anxiety, then by that second or third session, you need to have them take something like the DAS. And then you're going to take it again. So I have clients who take the DAS every time they come in, because I'm looking to make sure, are we trending in a good way? Are we steady, or are there ups? Are there spikes in their scores? And if so, what's happened? What's transpired since the last time I saw them that they've spiked in anxiety or depression? Or if they were up high 1 week and then 2 weeks later they're down, what's happened that it's brought that down? So you do want to be consistent when you're using something like the DAS. It's not just a one-time deal. Then the psychological report. Now, depending on your population, you may write a psychological report once or twice in your career. And again, depending on your population, you may be writing a psychological report every week. So it just depends on your passions and what you want to focus as your population. The more you work with courts, probably the more you will write psychological reports. But do know it's not if, it's when you will write at least one in your career. And so you need to be prepared. You need to know how to write in a way that's articulate, that shows your professionalism. You should not have any grammatical errors in your report. It should be very clear. Your report should be concise. The first one I had to write for a judge, I consulted with a lawyer who is also a psychologist, and I paid him. I think it was $65 for him to review my report, and he made some great suggestions. Because let me tell you something, I would rather pay him $65 to review my report than me turn in something that's wrong and I get sued. So you know the people in your area that you can go to. Dr. Flynn is my go-to person. He is a family lawyer and a psychologist. So I trust him, and his input was fabulous. And I so appreciated that, and I was able to make the corrections and then send it off to the judge. I did not have to do that very often, but I'm glad to have someone who is familiar with that and can help me to make sure that I'm doing it correctly. So the other thing you want to do is find the people in your area that are lawyers or psychologists that you know that you could call or set up an appointment to review your psychological report if necessary. You may not ever have that situation, but it's always good to know a lawyer who's familiar with LPC and LMFT, just in case you need that. Hopefully you won't ever, but again, it was really good to be able to call Dr. Flynn and have him review my report before sending it in. He also helped me with another report for another judge, and which wasn't as detailed, but he gave really good pointers. Sometimes we use our counseling jargon without realizing that we're doing it, and so he pointed out a couple of things that I needed to change because to a judge that wouldn't make sense. And so it's really good to have someone like that that can read your report and make sure that what you're writing would make sense to a non-counselor. I hope this information is helpful to you. I hope you've enjoyed this class. You've done great. I look forward to hearing your next step of your academic career. I know some of you will be graduating in December, and I know you're kind of going through that countdown, but stay strong and dedicated to what you are doing. Take this information with you. So just because this class ends, you will need this information the rest of your career as a counselor. So you might want to hang on to your textbook just to serve as a reminder of how to write a report. Also has all that information about different instruments and assessments, so that may be a good resource for you in the future. So thank you again for a great 7 weeks, and I wish you the best as you continue the rest of the semester.